Hello, I'm Philip Stoten. I'm here at Productronica 2015 and I'm joined by Martin Cotton from Ventec, from Ventec's OEM Group. So Martin, tell me what's going on in the OEM Group at the moment and what's driving you in terms of demand and technology.
Well, the OEM Group, Phil, as you know, is quite a new venture within Ventec. We're only 18 months old, so there are quite a few challenges with such a small group and then how we reach out. So we've kind of focused up on a couple of areas. One is we're trying to obviously look for the low loss arena, because obviously that's a future niche that we need to get into. And that feedback we get from our OEM customers, for example, that provides leadership back into the R&D group, for example. So there's a whole pile of products which we're looking at for the future on that kind of area. Now with Mil Aero, for example, that's a much more defined area, and we are much more experienced in that particular arena. But that said, we've kind of been focused on more from the PCB supplier angle and not so much the OEM. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. What I was going to ask you about from that point of view is 18 months is kind of long enough to have got a feel from the market to understand who you need to be talking to, so we'll talk a little bit about that within the OEMs, but also for you to be able to start to influence Ventec's R&D. Is that really starting to happen? You're starting to see products come to market or close to market? Yeah,
there is. I mean, in fact, we're off to Israel next week because our Israeli market is really taking off with the aerospace and avionics arena. And some of our materials are so, how do you say, applied technology, certainly, but they're actually tuned for specific applications, which is something that I have to tell you, I didn't realise when I joined Ventec that people actually did this. Okay, it is a tuned material, and I find that fascinating. And then part of that deal is that we then open it up to the specific OEMs, for example. And then we have OEMs in the avionics and defence group who are specifically after us because of our AS9100 accreditation, for example. Something else which when you first start this thing, you don't actually know. So in the last 18 months, I would say, yes, there is a definite feedback from our direct PCB suppliers, but now the OEMs are actually getting in on the act as well. Yeah,
and is it the purchasing guys in the OEMs, is it the engineers, is it the printed circuit board guys, or have you got to speak to everybody?
It's mostly everybody. You've got to get your in, as you know, but I would say our main focus is the engineering staff. That is the key. And that has good parts and bad parts. It is the wall or the sponge quite often. You know, the sponges will take you in and listen to you, and you can listen to them, and then you get information backwards, which is both beneficial to you and the OEM. The walls, what they tend to do is they're there just to see if you've got anything, and they won't discuss anything internally. So that becomes a harder interaction, but that's a longer interaction. But you know, it works eventually.
Yeah, and it's going to build for the long term, isn't it? And it's going to develop that. And I guess with the engineers, with the PCB designers, with all those guys, you've now got a team within Ventec that speaks their language, and that's really important too.
Yeah, since January this year, we've hired Mr. Peter Coolan, who's looking after the more router telecom data set arena, you know, the Alcatels, the Nokias, all these type of guys, Cisco's, etc. So he's on board as a global account manager. So we kind of understood that's a particular sector. We need to understand more about it, and that feedback loop has been highly beneficial. We've also hired Tamara Dendas, specifically for the avionics and defence arena. She has 15 or 16 years experience on that particular arena, and we've hired her as a global account manager to partner Peter. So we've got two sectors specifically covered. Okay, we now also have a gentleman in the US looking after the IMS side of us in the US, for example. This is just on the OEM. This is not selling to the PCB shops or anything like that. It's just on OEM.
Yeah, and further down selling to the PCB shops, there's growth and plenty going on there. So exciting times. Martin, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for chatting, and enjoy the show.
Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.